It's finally here. Most people are preparing for the wrong thing entirely, because this moon will surprise you. Everyone hears pink full moon and instantly thinks it's soft, calm, maybe even comforting, but maybe not always. This one affects you in ways you couldn't even imagine, and if you understand it, it can actually work in your favor. Because the ones who catch it don't stay the same after, and most people won't even realize what they just missed until it's already passed. The biggest misunderstanding about this full moon is the word pink. People hear it and immediately think softness, calmness, something gentle and comforting. But that's not what this represents at all. Pink is not the end state. It's the signal right before something becomes undeniable. Think about the sky just before sunrise. That soft pink tone doesn't mean the day is here. It means it's about to be, whether you're ready or not. That's the energy of this moon. Because wanting something in theory is easy. It's comfortable. It keeps everything in the realm of possibility. But this moment shifts it out of theory and into reality. There's a reason this full moon lands right on April 1st, and it's not a coincidence people are overlooking. Everyone thinks April Fools is about being tricked, but this isn't about deception. It's about where you've been playing smaller than you need to and calling it stability. Look closely because this shows up in ways that don't look like mistakes at all. Staying in something that already feels temporary, but treating it like it's permanent, just because it's familiar. Holding back on a decision you've already made in your head. Stretching out the waiting phase like you still need more clarity. Acting like you're not ready yet, like you need more time, more proof, more certainty. When the moment has already opened and you know it. And the irony is, the fool in this moment isn't the one taking a risk. What makes this full moon powerful is also what makes it dangerous if you don't catch it in time. This is one of those moments where your ability to see multiple angles sharpens, but instead of helping you move forward, it can quietly pull you into a loop where everything starts to feel equally valid. You see the pros, the cons, the risks, the outcomes, and before you know it, you're not making a decision anymore. You're managing possibilities, and it feels productive. That's the trap. You tell yourself you're being smart, you're being careful, you're thinking things through, but in reality, you're just delaying something that's already clear. Overthinking doesn't come from a lack of clarity, it comes from not trusting the clarity you already have. This is where people lose momentum during this moon. Not because they made the wrong move, but because they never moved at all. You'll notice it if you pay attention. One version of you is ready, already decided, already leaning forward. The other version keeps introducing doubt, keeps asking for more time, more proof, more reassurance. And the longer you stay in that space, the heavier everything feels. Not because the situation is complicated, but because you're stretching something simple into something it was never meant to be. The ones who move through this cleanly don't wait for perfect certainty. They recognize when something has already clicked internally, and they act from that point. The ones who stay stuck keep searching for a level of confirmation that never arrives. One of the most overlooked things about this full moon is that not everything it does is loud or dramatic. In fact, some of the most important shifts happening right now don't come with a moment you can point to or a realization you can explain out loud. They happen quietly, almost in the background, and you only notice them when you compare how something used to feel to how it feels now. There are things that have been sitting with you for a while, not intense enough to force your attention every day, but always there in some form. A thought that lingers longer than it should, a situation that used to carry weight even when you weren't directly dealing with it, a tension that never fully left, even when everything seemed fine on the surface. And then, during this kind of moon, something strange starts to happen. It doesn't disappear all at once. There's no breakthrough moment, no dramatic release, no clear turning point. It just stops holding the same grip on you. You think about it, and it doesn't land the same way. You remember it, and it doesn't pull you back into the same state. It's subtle, but it's real. The most powerful healing doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself in what no longer affects you. That's why a lot of people wake up around April 2nd with a feeling they can't fully explain. Not excitement, not relief, but something quieter. A sense that something heavy has loosened, even if they can't name exactly what it was. And the reason this happens now is because not all healing requires effort. Not all healing needs you to go back, revisit, analyze, or process something again and again. Sometimes the shift happens because you've already gone far enough internally, and this moment just allows your system to catch up to where you actually are. Your body settles. Your mind stops looping. Your emotional state recalibrates without you forcing it. It feels like a release, but without the struggle that usually comes before it. And this is where people miss it, because they're expecting something bigger, something more obvious, something they can label as progress. But real progress doesn't always feel like a breakthrough. Sometimes it feels like something that used to matter just doesn't anymore. You don't always heal by fixing something. You heal by outgrowing the version of you that was affected by it. This moon creates that kind of space, not by pushing you into action, but by removing the pressure you didn't realize you were still carrying. There's a reason why this moment isn't just about the full moon itself, but about the window surrounding it. The 24 hours before and the 24 hours after are not equal to the rest of the month. This is where everything intensifies, not in a chaotic way, but in a way that sharpens you. This isn't symbolic. This is measurable. The full moon physically affects the tides of the ocean. So during this 48-hour window, you're not just thinking differently. You're operating differently. Your instincts become faster. Your internal signals become clearer. Things that would normally take time to process, you just know. And that's where this becomes important, because this is not a passive window. This is what you could call a decision point, but not in the usual sense where you're weighing options or trying to figure things out. This is where things feel already decided internally, and the only question left is whether you follow through. The moment you've been waiting for doesn't arrive with noise, it arrives with certainty. That's the difference here. Outside of this window, hesitation feels normal. It feels like part of the process. But inside this window, hesitation feels heavier, more noticeable, almost unnatural, because everything in you is aligned for movement. Conversations that happen now carry more weight. Decisions made now tend to stick. Actions taken now create momentum that's harder to reverse, not because of luck or coincidence, but because you're operating from a more accurate version of yourself. This is why urgency actually makes sense here. Not rushed, not impulsive, but direct. If something feels clear during this time, it's not random. If something feels like it needs to be addressed now, it's not something to push aside. And the people who use this window properly don't necessarily do more. They just stop delaying what already feels obvious. There are moments where waiting is wise, and moments where waiting is the mistake. This is not a waiting moment. This is what makes this full moon different. It's not just showing you something, it's placing you in a position where you can actually move on it cleanly, without the usual resistance. And whether you act on that or not determines what carries forward from here. And now, it's time for today's comment. It doesn't matter how slow you go as long as you don't stop. Not everyone moves at the same pace. Some people sprint, some people walk, some people pause and gather themselves. But progress isn't measured by speed. It's measured by direction. Even slow movement is still movement. And the truth is, consistency over time will always outlast quick bursts that don't hold. So if you're moving, even a little, you're still on track. Thank you for sharing this reminder. Everyone talks about January like it's the moment everything resets, like the clock strikes midnight, and suddenly you're supposed to become a completely different version of yourself. But if you really look at it, January has never been a natural starting point. It's cold, it's slow, everything is still in a kind of dormant state, and most people are trying to force momentum in an environment that isn't actually supporting it. April is different. This is the point in the year where things are not being forced anymore. They're unfolding on their own. The light has shifted, the days are longer, the environment itself is moving again. You see it everywhere. Trees that looked dead are suddenly active again. Animals that disappeared during winter start reappearing. Seeds that have been sitting under the surface, doing nothing visible, begin to break through without effort. That's not symbolic, that's real. And this full moon lands right in the middle of that transition, which is why it carries a completely different kind of momentum compared to anything tied to January. Real beginnings don't happen when you decide. They happen when the environment supports the decision. This is why so many things that felt forced at the start of the year either slowed down, faded out, or never fully took off. It wasn't necessarily because you lacked discipline or consistency. It's because you were trying to move forward in a phase that was still designed for holding, not growing. Now that changes. This moment acts like a second entry point, but it's not just a repeat of what you tried before. It's a cleaner version of it. The noise that was there in January, the pressure, the expectations, the overthinking, that's not as present now. What's left is whatever actually matters, and that's why this reset feels quieter, but more real. You're not trying to become something new out of nowhere. You're continuing something that already started internally, even if it didn't fully show on the outside yet. The earth itself is moving with you now, not against you. And this is where people miss a huge opportunity, because they think they already tried earlier in the year, so they treat this moment like it's just more of the same. But it's not. This is where things that didn't work before suddenly feel easier. Decisions that felt heavy start to feel obvious. Actions that required effort start to feel natural. Not because the goal changed, but because your timing is finally aligned with something that actually supports it. Timing doesn't just affect outcomes, it determines whether something feels like struggle or flow. So whatever quietly fell off at the start of the year, whatever you told yourself you'd get back to later, whatever intention lost energy, this is where it reopens. There's another side to this full moon that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's probably the part people feel the most but don't fully understand. This isn't just a moment of clarity or decision-making, it's also a moment of attraction. Right now, there's a noticeable shift in how things respond to you. Not in a forced or exaggerated way, but in a way where what you've been building internally starts to reflect back to you externally. This moon has a strong connection to beauty, magnetism, and alignment, not in the surface-level sense, but in the way things naturally start to connect when they're on the same level. If you've been doing real internal work, getting clearer, becoming more direct, dropping things that don't fit, you start to see subtle changes in what comes toward you. New conversations that feel different from the usual ones, opportunities that weren't there before suddenly appearing without you chasing them, ideas forming in a way that feels complete instead of forced. It's not random. What you attract isn't based on what you want, it's based on what you've become able to hold. And that's why this moment feels different for different people. If you've been putting things off, avoiding decisions, staying in that loop we talked about earlier, this energy can feel frustrating, like things are just out of reach. But if you've been moving, even quietly, even without external results yet, this is where things start to meet you halfway. This is where the external world begins to mirror the internal shift. And it doesn't always show up in obvious ways at first. Sometimes it's a small opening, a simple interaction, a new idea that feels more solid than anything before. But those small things carry more weight right now because they're aligned. There's less friction. Things connect faster. People notice you differently. You notice opportunities faster. And it creates this sense that something is starting to move in your favor, not because of luck, but because the gap between where you are and what you want is starting to close. The part of this full moon that actually changes things isn't the obvious peak, the big realization, or the moment where everything suddenly makes sense. It's something much quieter than that, something most people overlook because it doesn't feel important enough at the time. It shows up as a small moment that doesn't announce itself. A quick thought that passes through your mind and almost gets dismissed. A short conversation that feels slightly different, but not dramatic enough to analyze. A decision that feels minor, almost casual, but carries a strange sense of finality underneath it. And if you're not paying attention, you move past it like it was nothing. But that's where the shift is. This moon doesn't always move through big, visible changes. It moves through precision. It places something in front of you that seems small enough to ignore, but significant enough to redirect you completely if you actually act on it. Life rarely changes in the moments you expect. It changes in the ones you almost ignore. That's why this part is so easy to miss. It doesn't come with pressure. It doesn't force you to stop. It doesn't feel urgent in the traditional sense. It feels optional. And because it feels optional, most people let it pass. But if you slow down just enough to notice what stands out, even slightly, you'll start to see it. Something will feel different, not louder, but clearer. Something will feel like it doesn't need to be thought about again, even though you're used to overthinking everything. It could be the moment you realize you're done with something without needing a reason. It could be the moment you decide to respond differently than you normally would. It could be the moment you recognize that something you've been holding onto no longer fits, and instead of analyzing it, you just let it go. And it happens fast. It doesn't wait for you to be fully prepared. It doesn't repeat itself over and over. It presents itself once, cleanly, and then it's gone. What separates this moment for you from how most people experience it isn't what's happening externally. It's the fact that you're actually aware of it while it's happening. Most people move through something like this unconsciously. They feel the shifts, they react to the changes, they adjust without realizing why, and by the time they look back, they can't pinpoint when anything actually started to move. But you're not in that position. You're watching it happen in real time. You're noticing the patterns, the moments, the shifts in how things feel and how you respond to them. And that alone creates a level of control that most people don't have. Not because you're forcing anything, but because you're not moving blindly. Awareness doesn't make you faster. It makes you accurate. And accuracy is what changes everything. When you're aware, you don't waste time second-guessing something that already feels right. You don't get pulled into loops that don't serve you. You don't stay in situations longer than you need to just because you didn't notice when they stopped making sense. You catch things earlier. You move cleaner. You recognize what matters and what doesn't without needing to go through the same cycle over and over again. And that creates an advantage that isn't obvious at first, but becomes undeniable over time. Because while other people are reacting after things have already shifted, you're adjusting as they shift. That difference compounds. It shows up in the decisions you make, the opportunities you recognize, the way people respond to you, and the direction things start to take without you forcing them. And the most important part is that it doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel like a major turning point while you're in it. It feels small. It feels subtle. It feels like you're just noticing things a little more clearly than usual. But those small adjustments are what everything builds on. And if you're still here, still watching, I genuinely appreciate you. Moments like this don't always feel big while you're in them, but they tend to matter more than they seem. Sometimes it's just one idea, one realization, or even one small shift in how you see things that ends up changing the direction you move in next. So as this full moon passes, don't feel like you need to force anything or figure everything out at once. Just stay aware of what feels clear and trust that you're already closer to where you need to be than you think. What's meant to open for you from here will.